There are moments in life when everything around you becomes shrouded in fog. You walk as if climbing a mountain without seeing the summit, without hearing applause, without knowing if anyone notices the effort. That image is not just poetry, it's the sign of an encounter that needs to happen. Loneliness, when seen clearly, is not a punishment. It is a calling. It is the same ancient voice that summons the soul to drop its masks and return to itself. As Carl Jung understood, the process of becoming whole requires that something dissolve first. The person who has always relied on external applause needs to lose that support in order to feel their own foothold. In other words, for a more solid self to be born, the mask that secured our social acceptance must go. That emptiness we feel, that sense of not being seen, is the invitation to find the center that was hidden beneath others' expectations. It is important to distinguish two senses of loneliness. One is being physically alone, an empty room, a dinner without company. The other, subtler, is the sense of disconnection. You take part in conversations but feel nothing touches your interior. Routines continue, yet your heart no longer recognizes those old certainties. That is where the inner journey begins. True loneliness points to a breakdown in contact between the public person, the persona, and the depth left at the margins, the shadow, the unconfessed desires, the wounds left unlooked at. Many interpret this phase as failure. If no one accompanies me, I must be wrong, we think. But that reasoning misses the key of the process. External distancing allows the internal to emerge. When outside voices fall silent, we finally hear the voice from within. That voice brings essential questions. Which part of me have I been avoiding? Which habit, relationship, social role do I maintain out of fear? These questions are hard, but they are the ones that lead to transformation. Imagine a tree in winter. At first glance it seems empty, lifeless, but its roots work in silence, seeking depth to withstand the coming seasons. Loneliness works the same way. In the apparent emptiness, the roots of your life deepen. This is not an empty metaphor. Many people, looking back, discover that their quietest months were the times of greatest inner growth. To turn this season into something alive, I propose a simple, practical gesture, a doorway to individuation. Set aside 5 minutes a day to sit in silence with your hand on your chest. Close your eyes and ask, what am I avoiding right now? Don't try to answer correctly. Notice the first sensation that emerges. Write down one word. Repeat for 7 days. This small habit begins to create a contact that routine suppresses. Throughout this passage, it is common to feel fear of losing who you have been so far. Losing the mask is frightening. That's natural. But remember, the mask serves an adaptive role. It is not your entirety. Courage here is not a heroic leap out of the world. It is a daily step inward, a quiet commitment to yourself. Loneliness, lived this way, becomes a teacher of inner strength. It teaches discipline, resilience, and a basic fidelity to oneself. I also want to demystify loneliness as something that must be urgently filled. Many fill the void with distractions, work, superficial relationships, consumption. Those responses relieve for a short time and delay the real encounter. What truly transforms is learning to sit with your own silence, to understand that without witnesses you can hear yourself more honestly. This process is the beginning of individuation, ceasing to be driven by external expectations and starting to form an internal authority. When everything around seems silent, don't rush to fill the space. Breathe, remain, and use this time to dig. Loneliness is hard, yes, but it is also the most direct school for growth. If you allow it, it will show you the way to a strength that does not depend on applause. Continuing the journey that began in loneliness, we now turn our gaze to the relationship we maintain with others, not only as company, but as a mirror of our self-esteem. From the Jungian perspective, the desperate search for solace from others is often a projection. We project onto others the authority our psyche has yet to recognize in us. This displacement creates a cycle of anguish. When someone does not respond, when attention is lacking, we feel as if something intimate has been broken. Not because the other person has absolute power over our being, but because, from early on, we were conditioned to use the other as proof that we exist. Emotional dependence often arises from a primary failure of reception. A child who learns that sadness is inconvenient, or that they must be quiet to keep affection, internalizes the idea that their emotions are dispensable. As an adult, that person seeks to repeat the old scene. They want someone to say, "You matter," to feel whole. That is when projection enters. We assign to the other the impossible task of confirming our worth. Identifying this pattern is the first step. You can observe it in simple behaviors, compulsively checking messages, waiting for constant approvals, feeling undone by silences. These reactions are not moral failings. They are old strategies that worked in another context and no longer serve the present. The invitation is to recognize the origin without judgment and then learn a concrete practice, to welcome yourself. A brief, powerful technique can be done now, in 1 minute. Sit or stand with an upright spine. Place your hand on your chest and breathe deeply 3 times. In a low voice or mentally say, "I am here for myself." Repeat for 60 seconds. This small act has a dual function. It interrupts the impulse to seek outside and creates a bodily gesture that associates presence with oneself. In this way, you train the capacity to soothe yourself without external loans. The journey of individuation, the process by which someone becomes whole, requires that we recognize the parts of ourselves we handed over to others. Where did I leave my worth? Where did I delegate the comfort I could have offered myself? The answer is not an attack on those who failed us. It is a recognition of where we placed responsibilities that should have been ours. I think of the person who, feeling insecure, recounts a situation over and over hoping someone will confirm that they suffered too much. Or the person who measures their day by the returns received. How many likes, how many messages, how many compliments. In therapy, this reveals itself as a repeated pattern. A child had their emotions rejected and, with no alternative, learned to depend on external confirmation. When we bring this pattern into awareness, the energy that once went into waiting is freed to build autonomy. Self-care here is not an empty label. It is adopting small, consistent practices. Write 3 real affirmations at the end of the day. Today I took care of myself. I did my best. My feeling is valid. Set aside 5 minutes to listen to your own tone of voice and name what you feel. Or create a simple reward ritual when you complete a task without seeking approval. These actions are bricks. Each one reduces dependence on others' approval and strengthens internal authority. There comes a point when practice stops being mere exercise and becomes transformation. When, faced with the other's silence, you do not collapse. This does not mean coldness. It means your emotional regulation belongs to you. You still feel pain when someone withdraws, but that pain does not drag you into the abyss. Instead, it points to where wounds still need to be welcomed. Part of this process is naming the projection when it appears. Ask yourself, what am I wanting this person to do for me now that I am not doing for myself? Which word, gesture, or proof do I want from outside? When you answer, convert it into a practical action. For example, write the letter you will not send, or do the task you expect someone else to acknowledge. By acting, you take back power over your own narrative. Finally, it is necessary to distinguish between seeking company and delegating your own emotional stability. Relationships are nourishment. They are not the sole source of life. Loving someone should not mean losing your footing. The ideal is to walk in company while also being a refuge for yourself. That is how you build the kind of intimacy that does not require saviors, but partners who applaud autonomy. These steps are neither quick nor linear. There will be relapses. But each time you decide to restrain the impulse to seek external comfort and instead welcome yourself, you advance in individuation. Real change happens through repeated practice, not a single grand declaration. Therefore, make small gestures habitual and observe how the pattern of dependence loses strength. When life pushes us against the wall, the voice that arises most strongly is often the voice of lament. We repeat stories of injustice, murmur for attention, and find temporary comfort in telling the same suffering. That attitude, seen closely, is a sign. Our consciousness has handed the helm to complaint. In inner language, this is the victim ego speaking, a mask that protects but also imprisons us. From the standpoint of inner images, complaint is a shadow asking for recognition. It is not that the pain does not exist. The pain exists and must be felt. But when the feeling solidifies into a narrative, why does this happen to me? It turns the energy into stagnation. Changing the question forces the psyche to move from why me to what can I do with this? This simple shift reallocates the burden. It removes power from the victim and returns it to the agent, the subject who chooses to act. The journey of individuation requires this shift. Taking responsibility does not mean blaming oneself for everything. It means noticing where one can intervene. It is a gesture of maturity, paying attention to what happens inside and, from there, choosing a response that builds, even if small. When we recognize that part of what irritates or saddens us originates in old wounds, we see complaint as a message from a shadow, a part not integrated that demands care and transformation. A simple practice that serves as a bridge between feeling and action. Stop for 1 minute and breathe 3 slow breaths. Name the emotion with a short phrase. Allow the sensation for 30 seconds without justifying it. Choose a 5-minute action that moves something forward. Write an idea, send a short message, straighten a corner of your home, walk to the corner. At the end, write 1 sentence. Today I took a step because. These steps are a small rite that interrupts repetition. Each action, however small, creates movement in the brain. Data show that rumination keeps conflict areas active, while deliberate action activates control and reward regions, releasing a sense of progress. Consider someone who keeps telling the same story of betrayal to friends, reliving the pain week after week. Complaint yields momentary sympathy but keeps the wound open. When that person decides, for example, to dedicate 15 minutes a day to learning something new or to tending to their routine, the story changes. It does not erase the pain but transforms the role it plays in life. The shadow ceases to command. Consciousness relearns to steer. Taking responsibility also means recognizing limits. Not everything can be fixed by our actions. Some losses are irreversible. Some people will not change. Still, there is always a margin where we can choose. How we speak, how we take care of the body, which thought we choose to feed. This margin is the field of inner freedom. A common trap is confusing responsibility with relentless self-criticism. Taking responsibility is welcoming one's own failure with curiosity, not paralyzing guilt. It is asking, what can I learn? And not merely repeating, I failed until the whole identity shrinks. Shame can be a teacher if we use it to grow, but when shame becomes a mantra, it becomes a prison. When you notice you are complaining, stop, breathe, name it. Decide on a small gesture that moves the situation 1 centimeter. Repeat. This habit, cultivated with patience, modifies the internal narrative. Instead of being someone who repeats wounds, you become someone who, while hurt, can turn the wound into a lesson. There is a subtle test that appears when we have already learned to stand alone, doing things without receiving applause. You can work, dedicate yourself, offer your best, and no one seems to notice. That surrounding silence is a dangerous invitation to give up. It is also a unique opportunity to grow inwardly. From the viewpoint of analytical psychology, this moment places 2 modes of existence face to face, living for external approval or living from an inner center. While the first asks for reflections, likes, praise, recognition, the second rests on an internal witness that notices, speaks, and sustains. Becoming that witness is an essential part of the process that makes us more whole. When we depend on others' approval, our energy flows outward. Each omission by others is felt as a gap in us, because we learn to measure our value by the echo we receive. But the echo is fleeting. A word of praise lasts minutes. The gaze you direct at yourself can last days, weeks. It can become foundation. Being your own witness begins with small gestures. It is not pride or theatricality. It is a practical exercise of attention and respect for yourself. I suggest a simple, accessible practice, a small wins diary. Every night, write 3 things you did that day that deserve recognition. They need not be grand. Finishing a task, being kind to someone, keeping a routine. Next to each, write how I helped you stay on course. At the end of the week, reread and choose a small reward. A walk, an afternoon of reading, a nice coffee. This ritual, repeated, shifts the source of recognition from outside to within. There are also brief rituals of self-witness that work in the moment. When you finish an important task, breathe deeply, put your hand on your chest, and say softly, I saw what I did. It is not vanity. It is naming your own effort. Naming transforms the unsayable into something with shape, and giving shape is the beginning of integrating what you did into your sense of value. I met a woman who worked long hours and often stayed late to finish projects. When prizes were announced, another name appeared. Her effort seemed invisible. Tired of seeking to be seen, she decided to turn her attention inward. Whenever she delivered something important, she noted 3 learnings from that work and set a short time for herself. 15 minutes of reading, a calm song, a coffee. In a few months, what changed was not only her feeling. Colleagues began to perceive her differently, not because she sought recognition, but because her posture was different, calmer, more steady. Her presence began to speak for her. Seeking approval puts our motivation in the hands of social chance. Validating oneself creates internal consistency. Consistency, in turn, generates trust. When you trust your own gaze, you become less vulnerable to the world's fluctuations. Self-esteem ceases to depend on the other's mirror and nests in your daily observation. Self-validation does not cancel humility. On the contrary, when you confirm your deeds, you can also see limits and mistakes without losing self-respect. Accepting failures as part of the path allows clearer judgments. When I recognize the effort and see where I erred, I can act to improve without dissolving in guilt. Another practical resource is listing achievements by categories: work, relationships, self-care. By organizing this way, you notice where you invest energy and where attention is lacking. Often we believe nothing changed because we only look at what is missing. The inventory shows what exists. When the fall happens, and it will, the soul faces a decisive moment. From the perspective of analytical psychology, failure is not a verdict on you. It is a luminous sign pointing to what still needs to be integrated. The fall reveals the shadow, parts of us that went unseen, care we neglected, truths we resisted accepting. Instead of treating it as an enemy, we should treat it as a map. There are two possible reactions to the same mistake: paralysis or using it as fuel. The first feeds shame and the narrative of incapacity. The second transforms shock into clarity. When we rise without waiting for the world's applause, something changes. Our internal authority widens. Not because we become invulnerable, but because we learn to walk despite the tremor. It is useful to understand what happens in us, simply. When expectation meets reality and there is a large gap between the two, an area of the brain that detects conflict lights up. It is what makes us feel pain and confusion. If we respond only with fear and self-criticism, the body tends to release a hormone that paralyzes us. If, instead, we take a step, however small, we activate brain regions linked to choice and progress, and with that comes a simple sensation, some relief, a thread of hope. Practically, regret freezes, action unblocks. Consider the story of someone who lost a company because of a partner's betrayal. The loss was total and it was easy to give in to guilt. I was foolish, I didn't notice. But the fall also brought an essential question. Where did I ignore my judgment? Which decision did I leave for later? By answering these questions with kindness and clarity, she discovered clues about her patterns and changed small habits. She revised contracts, learned to delegate more clearly, began checking numbers weekly. A year later, she reopened her business, smaller and more solid. The wound did not disappear. It served as an oven to forge another stance. Another practical example, the mother who works 2 shifts and dreams of a small business. When exhaustion knocks her down, she has 2 options: give up until the dream cools, or reduce the objective to one possible step. Instead of waiting to feel inspired, she woke up 15 minutes earlier to write one small task, research a supplier, write a menu, add costs. That repetition, even without joy, created movement. Little by little, the desire took shape and inspiration came as a reward, not a prerequisite. From that emerges a simple rule: the fall illuminates the shadow, the will transforms illumination into change. It is not enough to understand that there is something to integrate. You must act. Here is a microplan to restart in 3 steps, designed for shock moments. Breathe and name for 2 minutes. Choose a 5-minute action that advances something minimal. Record in a few lines a practical lesson and a realistic commitment for the next 7 days. Repeating these steps creates a recovery cycle. Feel, act, learn. Each round makes the inner muscle more resilient. Discipline is the habit of starting even when the heart hesitates. It is not about hardness. It is a pact with yourself. Start small. 15 minutes of work on your goal every day for 1 week. If energy is lacking, do the time. Consistency builds willpower. Science confirms, emotional inertia keeps us stuck. Action, even modest, generates chemical signals that support movement. Therefore, the best response to failure is not interior martyrdom, but a concrete act, however small. At this stage, the final question often arises: what if no one understands me? If no one applauds? If the silence persists? The answer is that external understanding was never a necessary condition for something true to be born in you. In symbolic language, there is a paradox. The less you demand to be seen, the more your light organizes by its own gravity. First, understand the other's limitation. Most people see what they are able to see. Their internal map determines how they receive you. This is not a fault. It is human contingency. When you demand understanding, you ask the other to carry your depth. You ask someone to walk in your shoes. Accepting that not everyone will understand is liberating. Turn the need for understanding into a commitment to your own truth. Instead of seeking an audience to validate you, ask, Am I being faithful to what I feel? That is the criterion that matters. Inner fidelity does not require translation or approval. It is a commitment you make to yourself, to act according to inner truths even when there are no witnesses. Practices that cultivate this clear presence: daily silence of 5 to 15 minutes to watch thoughts like clouds, a 1-minute confirmation ritual when finishing a task, saying quietly "I saw what I did" and noting it in a notebook, an action without expectation, a task done only for yourself, for 7 consecutive days, observing how your relationship with effort and meaning changes. I remember the painter who stopped producing to sell and decided to paint for herself, without telling anyone. She spent weeks by a lake, away from comments and likes. The work that was born there was different, greater in authenticity. When she returned, by chance someone saw and recognized her work. Curiously, recognition came because she stopped searching for it. This shows that inner strength does not depend on acceptance. It attracts it when whole. Sum up in 3 pillars: integrity, do what you feel is right without calculating social results; inner witness, record, in writing or aloud, your actions and reflections; compassionate persistence, care for yourself as you walk, don't punish yourself for not being understood. I propose a 7-day exercise. Commit to 3 daily acts, 5 minutes of silence, a small record of a victory, and 1 action done for you and only you. At the end of the week, review the notebook and note how your sense of being enough has changed. I close with an image. Imagine a lighthouse on the coast. It does not shout to be noticed. It shines because there is a greater duty. So it is with someone who learns not to need to be understood. Your light does not depend on others' gaze. It guides navigators because it remains steady. At the end of this journey, you do not become insensitive to the world. You become whole in relation to yourself. And from that wholeness arises a kind of authority that no one can take away. You have traveled steps that go from loneliness as an initial signal to the autonomy of your validation. This path is not linear. There will be relapses, but each fall is a new opportunity to integrate the shadow. When the need to be understood diminishes, life opens to other ways of belonging, calmer, truer. If you wish, I can transform this entire text into video scripts, guided meditation scripts, or a 7-day plan with reminders. Tell me which format you prefer and we'll continue together.